from your viewpoint, do you think that K-pop is completely different in terms of the way Western pop models are structured? The one thing I can compare it to is Beatles Mania or like 1990s boy band culture.
Well, I think the differences are just matters of degree, really. And I think it's important to understand that kind of 90s idea of the manufactured band, that itself was a sort of historical phenomenon, because in that people had come to think of a band being put together by a bunch of professional promoters and being given songs to sing was a sort of novel thing, was an unusual thing. And that's partly because it was really the Beatles kind of established this idea in people's minds that lasted for about a generation, that what it meant to be in a band was like to write your own songs and start off building up a local live following and such. Because historically, there isn't really anything unusual about the idea that singers are performers and they're performing like dance routines choreographed by other people. They're singing songs sung by other people. I mean, that's more historically normal, really.
Hmm.
So in that sense, I don't really think K-pop is particularly unusual. Obviously, there are things that do make it unusual. I mean, the thing that's most obviously making it unusual is the fact that it's happening in this era of like platform media and online communications, which means this music scene from South Korea has been able to get a global audience. I mean, that's the thing that's really striking. So I think that's the most significant thing. Obviously, the way in which K-pop is organised is sort of notorious for the level of sort of discipline and to which the musicians are subject. You know, there's all these films in the 70s, about the sort of music industry. There's a film called Breaking Glass. I mean, that was a sort of punk film about the music industry people trying to sort of make this sort of punk band become all commercial. But the idea that there's what the music industry does is it takes these kind of young people and tries to sort of puppet them. But that's not a new idea at all. That's something that people have been sort of observing for decades. And I guess what's different about the situation with K-pop is it's really institutionalized and it's kind of widely accepted. But I also think that you can compare it to Motown. The Motown studio system, for example, meant that singers who worked for Motown had to sign a contract. They had to be told how to dress. You know, there was some supervision of their lifestyles. In all those senses, now I don't think none of that is what's novel about it. I think what's novel about it is the fact that it's coming from East Asia and it has this global audience.
Do you think that the way that K-pop has been marketed and all of the structure and rules and regulations, do you think it intensifies parasocial relationships because of the amount of content, the amount of fan and idol interaction and so forth? Or do you kind of think, well, that comes with any type of music regardless, and it's kind of the responsibility of the consumer to be a consumer and not to let it be all and end all of their life?
Well, I guess this is just like a lot of things in the age of sort of platform capitalism, that obviously things have the potential to become intensified. But again, there's nothing really new about the processes. I mean, there was lots of research in sort of pop music studies. And I mean, there's a whole field of what's called fan studies, which goes back to the 80s. And people were writing about the kind of very intense sort of fantasy relationships and parasocial relationships fans had with bands as far back as at least to the 70s. And especially, it was always young girls, and there were always these debates about whether it was unhealthy, whether actually it was just a phase. It was kind of a fairly normal thing to go through. And there were these institutions. There's this thing that sort of I don't know if it even really exists anymore. It's sort of been replaced by like Instagram feeds and what have you. But there was this phenomenon of the fan club. You could join an organization called the fan club and you would get you get stuff in the post and you get badges and stuff. And you would be encouraged to think you had a sort of relationship of some kind with the band by being in the fan club. So obviously all that has been taken up to a new pitch, at least to the extent that people want to or allow it to be taken to a new pitch. But by sort of platform media. But I think a lot of the time, this in many ways it's another example of platform media actually replacing print media and doing things that were basically done through print media earlier in ways which they're now much more visible. Like anybody can see now. You don't have to be a member of the fan club to see what the fan club are doing. But yeah, it always was a sort of phenomenon. I think in some ways you have to understand K-pop partly in the context of a situation in which that stuff has become much more devalued in sort of Western culture. I always say, you've got to understand K-pop in the historical moment of Taylor Swift, because Taylor Swift becomes like the biggest star in the world mainly by getting an audience who would have historically been the audience for boy bands. And so now you've got this phenomenon, and it's really the first time in history that that's happened, that the normal thing for a 12-year-old girl to be really into isn't some boy band. It's actually like it's a woman. It's kind of young woman who she kind of looks up to and admires. And within that context, boy bands have been really kind of, denigrated, like understandably, and so they sort of haven't, but clearly on a global scale, and to some extent even in Western countries, there are still plenty of young people, especially young women, who want that experience, who want that kind of relationship to the object of their fandom. And so K-pop has sort of supplied that demand at a moment within the sort of the British and American music industries. It had come to be seen really sort of icky, to do that. And also, record companies weren't looking for boy bands anymore. They were looking for the next Taylor Swift. This is why, so much, this is where Billie Eilish and Charlie XCX come from, really, is the music companies that would have been looking for the next boy band. Instead, they were looking for the next Taylor Swift. And that's what's created the opening for K-pop.
So in the east and southeast of Asia, due to more accessibility when it comes to K-pop idols, more events and so forth compared to the West, which would be like one concert a year. Do you think the way that the K-pop idols are marketed, so they have dating bans, image control, they can't have their own personal opinions put out too much. The person in the band will have this role, this person will have that role, and then they're all given like a personality. And the fans in the East and Southeast of Asia will have more accessibility, so more events, face-to-face fan signs. Do you think that all of this encourages the emotional attachment and entitlement to how these idols live and behave and so forth? Because you actually have a lot of fans, especially in the East of Asia, they have a lot of say, and they'll say, oh, I'm not happy with this. And then all of a sudden the company will change something, or a public apology will be given and so forth. So do you think that reinforces entitlement
Sure.
and fantasy?
I don't really have any
Mhm.
answer except yes. Yeah.
Capitalism does incentivize parasocial intensity. Would you agree that again it's kind of irresponsible of the music companies? The question I'm trying to answer is, actually fans are responsible for their own mental health.
I think you sort of can't blame, capitalists are going to do capitalism. So they're going to do whatever they can to accumulate profits. Clearly, some of the things they do can be harmful for the mental health of young people, but this is true. Like literally, I would say it isn't possible to have a corporation making profits in like millions per year that isn't doing anything that's harmful to the mental health of young people, basically, especially in of the internet, where it invariably means you're competing for people's attention in ways which is always kind of damaging. So say it's I mean they are responsible, but so are all big companies, basically, like whatever they do, whether they're selling clothes, whether they're promoting sports, or they're promoting games. I mean, that logic of capital accumulation and sort of profit seeking, basically. So from that point of view, I don't think it's really fair to say fans should be responsible for their own mental health, because you're mostly talking about children. You're
Oh,
mostly
not
talking
not
about
really. The age range is like young up until like 40s, 50s and beyond. So yeah, just think
okay,
about it
well,
in that pool. Yeah.
I wouldn't want to say anyone is responsible for their own mental health. I think
Mhm,
we all of us as a society are responsible for each other's mental health.
mhm.
So from that point of view, but I don't think that I don't think anybody would seriously say that like K-pop fandom is high on the list of social problems we should be worrying about, like given all the other things. So therefore, I wouldn't say that those big Korean media companies are particularly high up the list of companies you can say are doing massive social harm, by the standards by contemporary industry standards, if that makes sense.